I'm going to ask you for some succinct, specific positions on the following. If you can give me an answer in a sentence or less, that would be great. I'm just going to call out
Asking Elliot Mintz to give an answer in a sentence or less is truly a challenge. Let me just put my head in a truncated mind space. Fire away.
I know you can do this. What is your position on capital punishment?
I oppose it completely. I could not conceive of any situation where if I were asked if somebody be put to death in my name, that I would take the rubber stamp and say yes.
What is your position on abortion?
I certainly believe in a woman's right to choose. I certainly believe in the maintenance of Roe versus Wade. I certainly believe that abortion should be legal. Having said that, no act of that nature goes by without significant moral consequences. And the only thing that I would favor is that there be some speed bumps placed between the desire or the necessity for that action and its culmination. And in a time when thousands of high school children view abortion as a form of contraception or birth control, I would like us to just take a moment to reflect upon the experience. So, in direct answer to your question, of course, that right should be reserved for a woman, but I would be remiss in believing that it is an act without serious ethical, moral, and religious consequences.
Same-gender marriage.
Sure. I'm in favor of the liberation of everybody. You know, whatever anybody chooses to do. If two people of the same gender want to get married, let them get married. No problem with that. Yes on same-sex marriage. But let's try and reach out to people who really believe that a true marriage is between a man and a woman, and let's talk to them, and let's have a dialogue as opposed to this combative stuff. It's the wave of the future. The wave of the future is anybody should marry anybody who they love.
Or as someone once said, why shouldn't gays be as miserable as straight people?
I'm not that cynical.
The legalization of drugs, are you for it or against it?
I take a kind of I think it's the libertarian position that we're now at a point where all this discussion about a war on drugs, I mean, it's just nonsense. When it comes to the obvious, like marijuana, I don't know of anybody who dies from taking marijuana. Marijuana seems to me to be a relatively harmless herb. I'd like to see it decriminalized. I'd like to see it be taxed. I'd like to see states profit from it. I'd like to remove the criminality element from it. It's not for me to say no.
Capitalism. There's a big one. You think it's working?
I'm a great believer in democracy, and I think it's a cause worthy of preservation. I've grown suspicious of capitalism and begin to fear that it has turned into a media spin word for greed. because it suggests that whoever has the most chips on the table wins, and the hell with everybody else. And I think if we look for the root cause of the problems that we're currently involved in, it's greed, blind greed. Oliver Stone in the movie Wall Street.
That greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works.
Greed is not good. It's a sin. And if there's a man on this block that's hungry, I'll never be well fed. And I think it was Kennedy who once said that a society that cannot protect the many who are poor will never be able to save the few who are rich. Is it okay for a person to earn $100 million a year? Should that be okay when we have so many people who are in need and who are hungry? I don't know what the number is.
That's a good question.
But I just know that every time you see somebody walk away with those bonus checks in an envelope, when the guys on the assembly line at GM walk away with an empty heart, that the fix is in. So, whereas I'm not saying there must be a limit, I'd like us to start thinking in those terms and seeing how much is enough.
Because capitalism taken to its, pure raw capitalism is what you said. He who has the most chips wins. There is nothing inherent in capitalism about doing good deeds for anybody. That is it's antithetical to what capitalism is. That's why shipping jobs overseas and people who wrap themselves in the American flag while they're doing it, they're being good capitalists. That's what you're supposed to do.
I'm inclined to agree with you, Jim. Again, democracy, different than capitalism.
Correct.
And even if America decides that capitalism should be the prevailing way, should somebody who makes more than $250,000 a year spend a little bit more money kicking it into taxes so we can have libraries and schools? I mean, if it's going to go for that and social welfare programs, I'm completely for it. So, again, let's just begin a dialogue of how much is enough off of the backs of those who are hurting. Now, let me be clear about this capitalism issue before anybody runs off thinking that I'm some kind of a raging radical socialist or any of those things. I don't subscribe to any isms. And I've expressed to you that I've grown suspicious of how the deck is currently being shuffled. I'm not advocating that we replace our current system with socialism, which obviously carries its histories of baggage and failures. I'm really interested in a conversation about fundamental decency and fairness when it comes to all aspects of our treatment of each other, including the employer-employee relationship, and the manner in which a person should be paid for the work he does or she does, and for that compensation to simply be fair and decent.
You brought up President Obama. How do you think he's doing right now?
I don't know him. I never met him. I met Reagan. I met President Reagan. I met Bill Clinton. I was a guest at the White House for those two administrations. I attended the Clinton inaugural. I've never met Mr. Obama. He appears to be a good guy to me. I am inherently suspicious of politicians. I did not vote for him. I did not support him. My passions were with Dennis Kucinich, actually.
When he was challenged by them, he said something. He said, each time a man or woman stands up for an ideal, acts to improve the lot of others, strikes out against injustice, he or she sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other in a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples create a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. Each person in this room is as a tiny ripple of hope. Each community you're from, you have a chance to cross with a million different centers of energy and daring. And so I believe that just with the people in this room and with the people that they're connected to around the country, that it's already started. People ask me, do you think this will ever happen? It will absolutely happen. It's just it's not a question of if, but when. It will. Absolutely.
Recently, our president gave what I thought was an extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary speech, standing in Cairo. And without recounting the speech, he spoke some very blunt truths, I felt, in a blunt way. It's also a poetic way, but he was very, it seemed to me, honest. One of the things he said is something that I've thought for a long time, that instead of lobbing missiles at children and old ladies, the Palestinians would be better served to take a lesson from Dr. King. And he pointed out that African American people did not get their long overdue rights in this country by force of arms. They did it through Dr. King's nonviolent approach. And that the world would see the Palestinian plight in a completely different way if they would stop lobbing missiles at people. But what is your thoughts on that?
I have great respect for the president. Of course, I support him. We all support him, and I wish him Godspeed. And I am so thankful I don't have the gig, you know.
Yeah.
And it's going to take an awful lot to iron out everything that's going on that I see on CNN. But if you deal specifically with a crisis like the Middle East, the Palestinians would not be lobbing missiles into Israel if the Palestinians were to have their legitimate right for statehood, their own recognized country, something that the Jews wanted for thousands of years before Israel was created. No missile lobbing into Israel, no aerial assaults on the part of Israeli aircraft over civilian populated areas in Palestine, no more advancement of settlements in areas that are being disputed, and either a pox in both their houses, which is not constructive, or a healthy understanding that we want two groups of people to share the holiest land in the world on an equal footing basis. They take no sides, no sides. And there's enough blame to go around. I'm not interested in the blame game. Israel must recognize the Palestinians' right to a homeland, and the Palestinians and the rest of the Arab world have to acknowledge and honor Israel's right to exist.
The space program. That's an interesting one that you had as an interest, and it's a great interest of mine. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on the space program as it is currently.
That was an epiphanous moment. It represented man leaving the crib. For the first time, we left here, we looked back. And that photograph that's just impregnated in my brain of Neil Armstrong with that visor on, showing planet Earth, without borders, without distinction, without race, or as John may have said, imagine all the people. That was one of the most prophetic statements in the course of my lifetime. What the space program does is it puts all of this stuff in perspective. And as significant as the people whose lights are lit behind my shoulder right now, we are here for just a brief second in time, just one floating planet among galaxies and God knows what beyond. And while we're considering acts 1, 2, and 3, the universe might be in play number 400 billion and act number 300 trillion, and viewing this as a blip on the radar. And we need this global perspective to put our own experiences in check. The most important thing that America has contributed to the world is the space program.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now. Okay, Neil, we can see you coming. Okay, I just checked. Getting back up. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Oh, that looks beautiful from here, Neil. It has a stark beauty all its own. It's like much of the high desert of the United States. It's different, but it's very pretty out here.
July 20th, 1969.
I'm going to pull it now.
We can help. We can join with. Together, we can explore the moon and develop the moon. We should go boldly where man has not gone before. Fly by the comets, visit asteroids, visit the moon of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato-shaped object that goes around Mars once in 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're going to say, who put that there? Who put that there? Well, the universe put it there. If you choose, God put it there.
I heard once that the Earthrise, the picture of the Earthrise above that new horizon that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin took is the most reproduced photograph in the history of man. And I too remember seeing that on a black and white television the first time. And my thoughts were, bingo, we got it. Now we all see it, right? We got it. No more war, no more, everybody understands. Let's move forward. Well, apparently not everybody was paying attention, or not everyone interprets it in the same way, because even though we've seen that, We know that we're this little dot floating out in the backwater of one galaxy amongst trillions of galaxies. We're still fighting over the Gaza Strip. We're still rooting for Notre Dame over South Carolina Tech or whatever. I don't even know if that's a school. Explain that to me.
Oh, I wish I could. It's one thing, Jim. We're in Los Angeles, California. It's one thing to get into a car and drive to the northern rim of the Grand Canyon. Get out of the car at sunrise and look out. That's the easy part. To comprehend the majesty of the experience, well, that requires a little taste of the divine. So we're really good in this country about getting from point A to point B. We really are. Look at Henry Ford. Look at the first airplane. Look at Steve Jobs. Look at the computer. I mean, we got that stuff down. But in terms of appreciating the significance and the impact of it, well, you know, that's another journey.
It's another journey.
It's easy to fall in love. Preserving romance, well, it's a separate category.